I retired from the Air Force last year after 20 years of service, and even though I've hung up the uniform, I'm still deeply connected to the military community, and I still talk to people on active duty, people in the Guard and Reserve, civilians, federal employees, retirees, and name it. And without fail, one of the most common questions I get whenever money comes up is this: if you still had a TSP today, how would you invest it in 2026? Now, technically, I don't have an active TSP anymore, and I rolled a portion of my old TSP into my business 401k, and that's a whole different conversation for another video. But for today, I want to answer that question honestly and simply. What would I do if I had $0 in my TSP? What if I had around 100,000? And what if I were sitting in $1 million inside a TSP? So let's start at the very bottom. If you have $0 in your TSP or less than $10,000, first of all, relax. I know social media like Reddit makes it sound like everyone has $500,000 by age 30. So just focus on you. Comparison is expensive and it does not compound. Now, this is not personal financial advice, and I don't know your full situation, your health, your pension, your spouse's income, or how well you sleep during market drops. What I am sharing is what I would do if I were in your shoes, based on what I know now, the mistakes I've made, and the scars I've earned along the way. Now, I'm starting at 0 in 2026. I am in what I call the learning phase. I don't know what I don't know yet. So I am going to stick with the easy button, the TSP Lifecycle Fund or the L Fund. Despite what you might hear from the experts who claim Lifecycle Funds are for suckers, it is perfectly okay to park your money there until you actually understand how the market moves. It is literally for people who want to set it and forget it. And if you don't know the difference between the C fund and the S fund, or you think the F fund stands for something I cannot say on YouTube, you can just stay in the Lifecycle Fund. Now, I say this from painful experience. When I first joined the Air Force back in 2005, the TSP used to default every single dollar of mine into the G fund, and that's government bonds. Was it safe? Yes. Was it profitable? Barely. It was borderline criminal how much potential earnings I lost between 2005 and 2011 because my money was basically sitting under a digital mattress. And on top of that, Roth TSP was not even an option until 2012, so I was stuck with traditional contributions for a while. Now, that's a topic I will cover in another video about choosing between Roth and traditional for 2026. And with that context, let me walk you through how the Lifecycle Fund actually works. The TSP assigns you a fund based on when you plan to pull the plug and retire. And if I'm going to hit age 62 around the year 2060, they would put me in the L2060 fund, and it's automatic. It rebalances my stocks and bonds every single day or every single year, so I don't have to touch it. Now, let me use the 2060 Lifecycle Fund to paint a picture here. And at this stage, I am somewhere around 25 to 27 years old, looking at roughly 34 years before I even think about retirement. And this particular L fund is built to be aggressive as hell, right? And we're talking about 99% stocks, 1% bonds. And look at how it's split up. 51% goes into the C fund, 13% into the S fund, 35% into the I fund, and the last 1% gets divided between the G and F funds. And what this means is that virtually all of my money, 99% of it, grows or shrinks based on how those three index funds perform. And that remaining 1% in bonds just chugs along at a steady, predictable pace with the G and F funds providing stability. Now, let me make this even more concrete with actual dollar amounts. Say, I've got $1,000 sitting in my TSP at this moment. And out of that 1,000, about $5 or 0.5% grows with the G fund, which tracks US Treasury securities. And another $5, same percentage, goes with the F fund covering government, corporate, and mortgage-backed bonds. Then $510 or 51% moves with the C fund tracking the S&P 500, basically the 500 biggest companies in America. And another $130 or 13% rides with the S fund capturing those smaller and mid-sized US companies. And the remaining $350 or 35% flows with the I fund, grabbing international stocks from companies outside the US borders. We're talking about Toyota, Louis Vuitton, Nintendo, companies like that. And for someone with 3 decades plus until retirement, This allocation makes complete sense to me. Now, let's look at the 2050 Lifecycle Fund for comparison. This one targets people born in that 1985 to 1989 window and people planning to retire somewhere between 2048 and 2052. The allocation here pulls back a bit from pure aggression. You're looking at 82% stocks, 18% bonds. And if you break it down, 42.5% sits in the C fund, 10.5% in the S fund, and 28.5% in the I fund. And that remaining 18% gets split between the G fund at 11% and the F fund at 7%. So with that same $1,000 example, roughly $820 works in stocks and $180 sits in bonds. This is definitely playing it safer compared to the 2060 fund. But here's my honest take. If I'm in my 20s or early 30s, and I'm just starting this journey, the 2050 fund is too cautious for my taste, since my retirement timeline stretches way further than someone in their late 30s or early 40s. I can handle more volatility, and I want that money working as hard as possible while time is still on my side. If I went too conservative early on, I might end up sacrificing significant returns over the decades ahead. Now, here's where people mess up. And I know I've caught flack for saying this before, but I do not mix my life cycle funds. And I see guys holding 50% in the L2050 fund and 50% in the L2060 fund. Why? You're defeating the entire purpose of the life cycle fund. The whole point of an L fund is that a computer algorithm perfectly balances your risk for you. If you mix them, you just created a messy manual calculation that you now have to track yourself. If you're risk averse, then pick an earlier date, like L2040. If you want to let it ride, pick a later date. But pick one lane and stay in it. Now, what you absolutely cannot overlook at this stage is capturing that full employer match by putting in at least 5% of your pay. Under Federal Employee Retirement System, or FERS, in 2026, your agency is already putting in 1% of your pay automatically. That includes the blended retirement system if you're on active duty in the military. That money shows up even if you don't contribute a dime, but when you contribute at least 5% yourself, the agency matches another 4%. That's how you unlock the full 5% agency contribution, which is literally free money sitting on the table. When you're early in your career, time becomes your biggest advantage. The longer your contributions compound, the more explosive the growth becomes. The thing is, staying consistent matters more than most people realize. There's this concept called dollar cost averaging that works in your favor automatically. When your contribution stays the same every paycheck, the math works in your favor, and you're buying more when prices are lower and less when prices are higher. Over years and decades, this averaging effect smooths out your cost basis. Markets fluctuate, that's inevitable, but if you're able to maintain those regular contributions, then you can take advantage of downturns rather than panicking. So with that said, it's time to move to the next level. Let's say I have $100,000 in my TSP. Now, if you're in the same boat, congratulations, you did not get here by accident. You didn't win the lottery. You ground this out. You probably bumped your savings rate from 5% to 10%, maybe 15%. You kept it there while your buddies were buying new trucks they could not afford. At this level, it's time to have a more nuanced conversation about life cycle funds versus building your own allocation with individual funds. So let's say I log into my account and confirm my money is still in the life cycle fund. The first question I'm going to ask myself is whether this fund actually aligns with my risk appetite. And if I'm in the L2040 fund, I need to understand that roughly 28% of my money is in bonds. And if it's L2045, then 23% is in bonds and 77% in stocks. With the L2050, roughly 18% is in bonds and 82% in stocks. And if you go out to L2055 or beyond, you're back to that 1% bonds and 99% stock allocation. Now, the first thing I'm evaluating is how much runway I have before retirement. If I'm more than 10 years out, I want a life cycle fund that leans heavily into stocks over bonds. The L2040 fund feels too timid for my situation because that means $28,000 out of $100,000 is parked in bonds, earning maybe 3 to 5% annually on average. Meanwhile, the remaining $72,000 is in stocks that historically deliver 7 to 10% per year on average. And that gap in returns compounds into serious money over time. And another way to sanity check my allocation is using the rule of 130. How to do this? Well, I take the number 130 and subtract my age. The result is the percentage I should roughly have in stocks. At 30 years old, that's 130 minus 30, which equals 100% stocks. At 35, it's 130 minus 35, giving me 95% in stocks. When I hit 40, it's 130 minus 40, and it will land me at 90% in stocks. As you can see, there's no universal formula because everyone's risk tolerance is different. But if you're feeling lost about the stock to bond split, this gives you a starting point. You can usually find a Lifecycle Fund that gets pretty close to matching your age-based contribution or allocation. Just remember, when you're working with $100,000, those returns really start to matter. 10% growth is 10 grand. 7% growth is 7 grand. And that $3,000 difference each year becomes massive over the long haul. Now, if I decide I don't want the Lifecycle Fund calling the shots anymore, this is where individual funds come into play. To start off, the backbone of almost every serious TSP portfolio is the C fund. For years, I ran my TSP at 100% C fund, not because I thought I was a genius, but because I believed in American businesses and long-term growth. And I've always followed Warren Buffett's consistent advice for non-professional investors to buy and hold a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, and in this case, it happens to be the C fund. And that approach worked very well over the last decade. And the C fund averaged roughly 15% annually over the last 10 years. But it also dropped hard in 2022, down about 18%. And that's the trade-off. Keep in mind that high returns always come with sharp drawdowns. You need to know that going in, not discover it in the middle of a panic. Then there is the S fund, which is the small cap index. These are the hungry up and coming US companies. For a while in 2020 and 2021, I ran an 80-20 split, 80% C fund, 20% S fund. And this combination basically mimics the entire US stock market index fund. But guess what? The S fund can be a rocket ship during certain market cycles. It actually beat the C fund back in 2020 and 2016. But lately, it's been lagging. The 5-year return on the S fund is hovering around 7.8% compared to the C fund's 15%. 10-year returns show 10.6% for the S fund versus 14.6% for the C fund. Now, would it bounce back as interest rates change? Maybe, but it's been the underdog recently. And for the third piece of this puzzle, there's the I fund, the International Stock Fund. This one has an interesting backstory. For years, it was the TSP's forgotten fund, and nobody paid much attention because it kept underperforming. But in 2024, the TSP switched up the benchmark index for the I fund, which expanded it to include more emerging markets and a much wider range of international companies. It went from covering roughly 750 companies across 21 countries to more than 5,500 companies spanning 44 countries. And the results in 2025 have been remarkable. Around the end of 2025, it was up 31.5% year to date. That's beating every other TSP fund by a significant margin, blowing past both the C and S funds. So does this mean I should dump my entire portfolio into the I fund right now? No way. That's chasing performances, right? And chasing performance is a losing game. What works this year might bomb next year. But what this proves is that international diversification has real value. The I fund exposes you to major global players like Toyota, Samsung, Nestle, and thousands of other companies. When US stocks are struggling, international markets might be thriving. And when international markets are down, US stocks might be climbing. And sometimes both markets can be down, as we saw in 2022. And holding both spreads your risk across the global economy. A popular allocation strategy you will see a lot is 80% C fund, 10% S fund, and 10% I fund, or maybe 70% C, 20% S, 10% I. This gives you worldwide diversification while still maintaining heavy exposure to US stocks, which have historically delivered the strongest long-term returns. So now we've come to the dream scenario. What if I had $1 million in my TSP? Well, first off, if you're in the 2 comma club, make some noise in the comments, and please don't ever think it's impossible. As of October 2025, there were nearly 190,000 TSP participants with over $1 million in their accounts. And that number is growing every quarter. But what do all those millionaires have in common? Simple. time and consistency. Most of them have been investing for decades. They did not hit $1 million overnight or through some market timing genius. They got there by contributing regularly and staying invested when everyone else was panicking. Now, with $1 million TSP, I'm probably in one of two situations. Either retirement is right around the corner, or I've still got a decent stretch before I'm done working. So let's walk through both scenarios because this is how the strategy shifts significantly and risk management becomes critical. This is also the stage where bringing in a fiduciary advisor makes sense because you need someone to review the full picture and make sure nothing important is slipping through the cracks. Now, let's say I'm getting near my retirement age, and my first move is calculating my annual retirement expenses to figure out what kind of income I need. Let's say I need $70,000 a year to live comfortably. If my pension delivers $36,000 annually, that's $3,000 a month. Now I'm still short $34,000 per year. $1 million in your TSP can absolutely cover that gap using the 4% rule. The idea is simple. You withdraw about 4% a year, and historically, that's been enough to last 30 years or more. So on $1 million, 4% is $40,000 a year, which more than covers that $34,000 shortfall. The new study even shows that a 4.7% withdrawal rate is considered safe. But I wouldn't leave that million entirely in stocks as I get ready to retire soon. And I would move a chunk, maybe 10% or $100,000 into the G fund. Why? Because that $100,000 is my war chest. This is 3 years of living expenses sitting in cash equivalent safety. If the stock market crashes tomorrow, I don't have to sell my stocks at a loss to buy groceries. I just spent my G fund money and wait for the market to recover. And again, this is if I need my TSP to pay for my retirement expenses in the very near future. Now, let's flip the scenario. Let's say I'm nowhere near retirement. Maybe I hit $1 million in my mid 40s or early 50s with another 10 to 15 years of working ahead. In this case, staying aggressive still makes sense. I might choose a lifecycle fund with a later target date like L2055 instead of L2040, which keeps me more growth focused, right? Or I might build my own allocation, something like 70% C, 20% S, 10% I to maximize growth potential. And I might even throw 5% or 10% into the G fund just to dial back volatility slightly. Now, here's what you need to understand when you're managing this much money. Small percentage moves translate to massive dollar swings. A 10% market correction means a $100,000 paper loss. And I'll be honest, watching six figures disappear from your account over a few days or weeks messes with your head. Your gut reaction is almost always the same. Get me out, put this somewhere safe. But if you're still years from retirement, that's typically the worst move you can make. And that's how people lock in losses instead of letting their money recover. And the market does not move in straight lines, but it has always recovered over time. That's why the real question is not what the market does next, it's what your next milestone is. You should always be calculating what it takes to double your TSP from here on out. So what's your next target? 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million? If you have $1 million base, you don't need massive returns to see substantial gains. A 10% return on $1 million is already $100,000. That's more than most people contribute over several years. Even moderate market returns add serious value at this level. Bottom line, the TSP ranks among the best retirement plans available anywhere. Fees are rock bottom. The fund options are solid. The agency matches free money, but it only delivers results if you use it intelligently. And whether you're starting from zero, building towards $100,000 or managing $1 million or more, having a strategy that aligns with your goals and risk tolerance is essential. Don't just set contributions and ignore your allocation without considering whether it makes sense for your current life stage. And whatever you do, never walk away from that agency match. That's the easiest wealth you will ever build in your entire career. And this has been another piece of a video, and I'll be a lot out of it.